San Francisco City Guides is a nonprofit organization offering free walking tours every day of the week. They offer over 70 different tours led by knowledgeable and enthusiastic volunteer guides. Their purpose is to preserve and perpetuate the history and folklore of San Francisco and to celebrate its rich history of cultural diversity. The Fairmont San Francisco opened in 1907 as the very first Fairmont Hotel. This Beaux-Arts architectural-style 5-star luxury resort with 606 rooms and suites is perched atop Nob Hill, one of San Francisco's original neighborhoods. James Graham Fair was the inspiration behind the Fairmont name and was considered one of San Francisco's wealthiest citizens in the early 1880s after striking it rich in a Nevada silver mine. His daughters, Tess and Virginia, began constructing a grand iconic hotel in San Francisco in the early 1900s. Fair's daughters created the Fairmont name by using his last name, Fair, and adding Mont, representing the location of the hotel atop Nob Hill in San Francisco. But soon after completion of the hotel, the San Francisco earthquake of 1906 struck the region and the hotel was destroyed. In 1907, the newly rebuilt Fairmont Hotel celebrated its grand opening.
So first off, I want to thank you as walkers and all the other walkers. We have a suggested donation of $20. We are a .org. We are an independent nonprofit. A little bit about Fairmont. Fair. James Fair. The Fair family's Fair was what we would call a silver baron. So the gold rush happened in 1849. Okay, 1859, even bigger, even richer than the gold rush. Much, 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 much richer was the silver rush. You see, San Francisco had kind of exploded in wealth based on, of course, the gold rush and then the silver rush. With all this money, San Francisco became a very social place. And so James Fair was part of a socialite family. Now, in the early 1900s, by the way, and I say that about 1905 or so, San Francisco had over 100 family banks. And that each family owned their own bank. And that had to do with the money and the revenue that was brought in, you see, during that time. Well, with all of this social appeal and kind of a puff-bird attitude of accomplishment, then there was also the idea to be social on the top of the city. And so where would the top of the city be? The tallest top of the city would be right here. So Fair, as in James Fair's family, and Mont, as in mountain, top of the city, was right here. It was his daughters that I refer to as daddy's girl, who thought their daddy needed the most incredible spot on the hill, on the mount. Okay, you have Virginia Vanderbilt. Her pet name was Birdie. And on your right, you have Tessie. So Tessie's married last name was Oelrichs, who is going to be the architect. And so at some point, you have this guy, and his name is Stanford White, and he is the architect who's chosen. But there becomes a little problem. So he falls in love with Evelyn Nesbit. So she's an actress. And at some point, Evelyn's husband becomes so angry because they're having an affair that her husband kills Stanford White. So that we could say that leaves a job opening, right? And so with that tragedy, along comes Julia Morgan. So Julia Morgan had more degrees than you could count, people said, because in those days, women often didn't get 1 degree. But Julia Morgan had degrees in engineering and the sciences, architecture. She was local. She has built some buildings here and over in the East Bay. They are still standing. We did have something that interrupted quite a few things in building and construction in 1906 called an earthquake, right? And then if you see her on the bottom, she's with William Randolph Hearst, because if it wasn't enough to be working on the Fairmont to get it going and running, it wasn't enough. On the weekends, she'd hop on a train, go down the coast, and go to Hearst Castle and do that project. So she was always, always, always going. But then, so what happens? Big mystery that happens when there's an earthquake. What did happen? Well, a lot of destruction, and I'll show you some of it, but the really big, the biggest serious problem in all of this actually took place within 12 hours after a fire. The Fairmont Hotel, it's actually melting inside because of the steel. And if you were standing all the way down that hill I showed you initially in the picture, what you saw coming out the top was billows of black smoke. It was one giant chimney. This is a historical building, and so it means that it's been restored. As we step through the hotel today and we go out back, you're going to even see that the Fairmont Hotel has beehives and they grow herbs. And so again, at the Fairmont Hotel, they maintain that whole quest for quality. Yehudi Menuhin, who grew up to be a very famous concert pianist or violinist. He was 6 years old debuting at the Fairmont Hotel. It was set up just like it is today. The living room, right? Not a nightclub, that came later, but the living room of the daughter's friends. And now we've stopped here because I want you to see some very stunning survivors of the earthquake. These 2 mirrors, twin mirrors, which come out of the 1500s, and they are stunningly the pets of the sisters. They adored these mirrors, and they are survivors. When they were refurbishing this in 1980s and such, they were looking for the marble. But the quarry, there's only so much marble in a quarry. And remember, they were digging around in the quarry in the beginning of the 1900s, originally. So what's the chance that the marble is going to be there anyway? So no, there wasn't the marble. So what do? You have to paint. You have to paint something that looks like the marble that you put there. And so here, I'm not going to tell you where the real marble is and where the painted marble is. I mean, you can always come back and play a game on that. So in the 1920s, so a guy named Smith, George Smith, took over, and his claim was this bar. So he wanted to design something that was so unique, and he used local artists, the Bruton sisters, out of Alameda, California. It's metal paint on wood. You can see at the bar that is what's called a zinc bar, a deco bar out of the 1920s. And it's designed whimsically, so there's a trough at the bar. So people used to sit at the bar with their cigarettes. You know, that cigarettes were a big thing. You put out your cigarettes, the water was running, you just put your cigarette in the trough and it carried it off. This is a wall of entertainers. And so what Ben did was something that even in San Francisco, no other location would even consider. So Ben created a nightclub here, which you'll hear more about from me because it's an astounding design, an innovative design for a nightclub. And Ben brought all these top entertainers to the nightclub. You can see them. Ella Fitzgerald, Tito Puente. What you notice about these people is that these are people of color, right? And in the other places that they performed in San Francisco, that they could not stay in hotels that they performed in. Not even fine hotels. Of course, the Fairmont was considered the finest of all. And there was always that competition with the Mark Hopkins. But nonetheless, no matter how nice the place was where you were performing, you would have to stay down somewhere else in the Tenderloin, but you couldn't stay here. And if you performed here, you couldn't order off the menu. They weren't going to feed you something that you picked from the menu at the other places. But what happened here? Ben made it quite clear. Oh no, you are staying at our hotel. You arrive a day or two early. You have a room, and guess what? You are ordering off the menu. This is one of the hearts that are painted by famous artists, and then the proceeds, they're purchased, and the proceeds go to the AIDS garden. And so there are, I want to believe now, calculating, I think there's about 1,000 or more hearts that have been purchased of this size. You'll see one downtown in Union Square, etc. And now I see that since this is the America's Greatest City by the Bay, Tony Bennett, installed October 25th. Tony Bennett, do you all know, was a fine artist? Yeah. These gentlemen, George Corey, and a man who would have been considered his husband, if he could have been called a husband, but he couldn't back then. Douglas Cross. Those are lyrics. They called them words back then, words by. For the song, I Left My Heart in San Francisco. It debuted here in the Venetian Room. The name of this room is the Vanderbilt Room. You may recall that Bertie was married into the Vanderbilts. Vanderbilt family was a big shipping family. It was actually a slave trade family going back, and then became transportation and such. And so the Vanderbilt Room is where Bertie got ready on her wedding day. And so this is called the Tonga Room, and it was Ben's whimsical idea, but also keen money-making idea, right? So it was a swimming pool back when Smith managed, and he put in this competitive swimming pool, and they actually had major competitions here. And that was in the 20s and 30s. When Ben came and took over this hotel, actually, you know, a lot of the old people from way, way back were living here on paying nothing hardly to stay here and to eat great food here. And then when he came down and he visited the swimming pool, and he saw all these single women with their hair up in towels and wearing towels. And he looked around and he thought, gosh, they're using the towels. There's no money coming in based on the swimming pool anymore. We got to do something with it. And he and May adored the movie South Pacific. And so did the entire United States and world. It won not only an Academy Award, but it won awards in other countries. And so that's when they said, we are going to create our South Pacific. Fairmont is used to craft cocktails from way back. So the rum drinks that were very appealing. And the food was unique then. And so you could see that it's very much a part of that time.